In the world of Buddhist monks, some rules aren't just guidelines. They're the absolute bedrock of the entire practice. Today, we're diving into the most serious of them all, the first Parajika rule. And trust me, this isn't just a story about a broken vow. It's about a spiritual defeat that you can't come back from. So, let's get into it.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? What actually happens when that one, most sacred vow gets broken? We're talking about a spiritual point of no return, a kind of defeat that, in this lifetime, is permanent. To really get the weight of this rule, we first have to understand the vow it protects. At the very heart of a monk's commitment is something called brahmacharya. You can think of it as the holy life, and it's all centered on complete and total celibacy.
And look, this isn't some casual suggestion. It's the very foundation of their spiritual journey. It means a complete turning away from worldly pleasures to focus everything, every single ounce of energy on the path to enlightenment. This vow shapes their entire existence.
All right, so to see what happens when that foundation cracks, let's jump into a real story from the scriptures. It's about a group of monks from the ancient city of Asali.
Now, these Vajjian monks, they weren't exactly roughing it. In fact, they were pretty comfortable. They had enough food, a place to sleep. Life was good. But that very comfort, well, it led to a kind of spiritual laziness, a dulling of their mindfulness.
And here is the absolute crux of the story. In a moment of deep carelessness, they broke that fundamental vow of celibacy. But the critical detail, the part that changes everything, is that they did this while they were still ordained monks. They hadn't disrobed, they hadn't given up their vows. In that moment, they were still wearing the robes. So time goes by, and life, well, it gets tough for these guys. They start to experience one tragedy after another. They lose family members, their wealth disappears, their own health starts to fail. And all this suffering, it forces them to look back, to really think about what they'd done.
And you can just feel the regret in their words. They didn't point fingers or make excuses. They knew the failure was their own. They called themselves people of little fortune because they just couldn't see the holy life through to the end. The self-blame was just immense.
So, full of regret, they think, okay, maybe we can get a do-over. They travel to find the Venerable Ananda, who was one of the Buddha's main disciples. They tell him the whole story and basically beg for a second chance to be ordained, to try and do it right this time. Ananda, being compassionate, takes their case directly to the Buddha. But what happens next isn't a story of redemption. It's a definitive, final judgment that would set a precedent for thousands of years.
And this was the Buddha's answer. It was absolute. He referred to himself as the Tathagata, the thus gone one, and said it was simply not possible to take back a Parajika rule. The door was shut. There was no second chance. To make sure everyone understood the sheer gravity of this, the Buddha then used this incredibly powerful and memorable analogy. He wanted to paint a picture of exactly what this kind of mistake means.
I want you to picture a tall, healthy palm tree, growing strong. Now, imagine someone climbs right to the top and just chops off its crown, the part where all the new growth comes from. What do you think happens to that tree?
That's it for the tree, right? It's done for. Its ability to grow has been completely and permanently severed. And that, the Buddha explained, is exactly what happens to a monk who commits this offense. In that lifetime, their ability to grow within the monastic community is gone for good.
Okay, so with that powerful story as our backdrop, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the rule itself. What exactly does this word, Parajika, even mean?
The word itself comes from the Pali language, and it literally means defeat. And this isn't like losing a game. It's a total spiritual defeat. The offense is so serious that the consequence is immediate. It's automatic. The person is, in that very instant, no longer a monk and can never be one again.
Now, here's a really fascinating part. This whole ordeal with the Vajjian monks actually prompted the Buddha to add a vital clarification. He had to make sure the rule was understood with absolute precision because when it comes to this offense, context is everything. Okay, check this out, because the difference here is critical. On the left, that's the Vajjian monk's situation. You break the vow while you are still a monk. The result, Parajika, defeat, game over. But on the right, if a monk formally disrobes first, they renounce the training and become a layperson again, and then does the same act, it is not a Parajika offense. That person could, in theory, decide to be ordained again later on. See the difference? The rule only applies when you break the vow while you are actively under that vow.
So the rule was set in stone.
Any monk who engages in sexual intercourse, and the rule specifies, even with an animal, is considered defeated. In that moment, they are no longer in communion, which means their connection to the spiritual community is instantly and permanently severed.
And you might be thinking, wow, that is incredibly strict. So why? Why so irreversible? Well, it's not really about punishment, it's about protection. It's a way to guard the integrity of the entire Sangha, the community, and to preserve the absolute purity of a path that demands nothing less than total dedication. It creates a boundary that cannot be crossed.
Which leaves us with a pretty deep question to think about. When a discipline is this final, this absolute, what is it really protecting? What does it tell us about the value of commitment, the identity of a community, and the unshakable foundation that an entire spiritual tradition is built upon?